Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Today, we're going to teach you about the luxury tax and the implications it has for the Knicks team building.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on all platforms. So be sure to check us out on YouTube. Hit that subscription button, hit that notifications bell to ensure you never miss an episode. And then when you're on the go, hit the auto download function on your podcast platform of choice to make sure we're with you at all times. I know that sounds a little creepy, but just wait till you hear who we are. I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster in the midst of a very busy season. Helping me out with that, he is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at the Strick.land. And Alex, this is your area of expertise. I'm going to leave the floor to you. We are going to explain what the luxury tax is and why it could pretty dramatically affect what the Knicks do this summer and in future summers, but also why some relief might be coming. Also, good to see you, buddy. It's been a while.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So yeah, I just concluded a couple episodes the other day, which if you haven't listened already, I went over all the contracts that are, well, so I should say every player that was playing for the Knicks this year. I went over their contract situation. So the guys that are sticking around, for sure, in like the Deuce McBrides of the world, the Dante DiVincenzo's, Josh Hart's, even Mitchell Robinson, who has 2 years left on his deal. Went over the guys that have team options like Bogdanovich, couple end of bench guys. Then, of course, Jalen, Brunson, Julius, Randle, both up for extensions this year. And the free agents, OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein being the top ones among those guys. And then I sort of ran out of time and I wanted to talk about the luxury tax a bit. So I figured this would be better to talk about together anyway, because it's sort of a philosophical team building question of whether the Knicks should be okay entering the luxury tax this year. Now, I think it's pretty much a given they're going to at least become a tax-paying team. What's a little less certain is if they're going to hit these new punitive first and second aprons that the NBA has instituted with their new CBA, collective bargaining agreement, for those of you that don't know the term, which basically is like the charter of the league for X number of years until they decide to rewrite it again and make rules that, sort of are related to keeping competitive balance, but also just the nitty gritty of it is it talks about the salary cap, how money gets distributed to teams and blah, blah, blah at its, most basic level. But so to just give an intro to what the luxury tax is. So basically, in its purest sense, the luxury tax is a number where if you're spending X amount of dollars above the salary cap limit, then you have to pay a tax to the league, essentially for saying like, hey, if you're going to be spending this much money on your players and whatever, you're going to, pay out the nose for it because we want to incentivize, there to be competitive balance between small and large markets in the league. So this past year, the tax was set at $165 million. And that was with the salary cap being $136 million. And so then there was the apron lines were $172 million for the first apron and $182 million for the second apron, which are the more punitive lines after that. So those numbers are going to go up this year. The salary cap itself is going to be $141 million, or at least it's projected to be that this year. So Jake Fisher from Yahoo Sports, who's pretty plugged in, had the second apron line estimated at $190 million for this coming season in a recent article. So I was just kind of doing a little bit of like napkin math and realized like, man, the Knicks are going to be kind of in danger of hitting potentially both these lines because if Isaiah Hartenstein signs the maximum deal he can with the Knicks, which as I outlined in the last episode was 4 years, $72.5 million. His starting salary would be around $16.2 million. And then if OG Anunoby signs a deal that averages out to around $35 million annually, his first year would be around $31 million before raises, give or take. So that's already $37 million that the Knicks would be committing just between those two guys. Then they already have about $145 million on the books if they guarantee Bojan Bogdanovich So if, again, just napkin math wise, you're already looking at probably dipping into the first apron and being real close to the second apron. If you do something like re-sign Precious Achiuwa for like $10 million a year or something like that, you're probably touching that second apron and reaching a point where things get real icky real fast as far as what you're able to do to keep building your team. So I'll just give the restrictions real quick that kick in with both those aprons, Gavin. And then before we kind of start getting into the team building philosophy, I'll let you react to that. But the first apron, what happens if you hit that, which again, if the second apron is figured to be about 190 million, it's 7 million over the tax line for the first apron, and then 17.5 million over the tax line for the second apron. So that would figure that the first apron would be about 179.5 million. So if you hit that first apron, salary matches and trades must be 110% of the outgoing salary rather than 125% for non-tax teams. So Fisher said 100% in his most recent article that I pulled that 190 million figure from, but every other place I find says 110%. So I'm going to guess that was a typo. But that plays out big for the Knicks, because if they go to make a star trade, if they're under the tax, or if they're under that first apron, I should say, then they can send out, so if they send out 40 million in salary, then they can get back 50 million in salary, because they can get back 125%. Whereas that then now, if you send out 40 million in salary over that first tax apron, then you can only receive back 44 million in salary. You can only go 10% over, whereas normally you could get 25% more back. They can acquire players in sign-in trades if incoming salary keeps them above the first apron at that first apron, and they can't sign players waived during the regular season if their salary prior to being waived exceeded the mid-level exception before they were cut, which is the mid-level exception this past year was about 12 million. That's what Dante DiVincenzo signed for. And it figures to probably be slightly more than that. So if a player's making like 13 million next year or over 13 million and gets cut, then he wouldn't be able to sign with the Knicks. Second apron gets way more punitive. So in the second apron, the Knicks or any team can't use their mid-level exception anymore at all, meaning they could basically only sign minimum salary players until they're under the second apron again, which I guess I should note. I think I missed it on the first one, but in the first apron, you can only sign players for $5 million using your mid-level exception. So you only get a small amount of money you can use. Second apron, you straight up can't use that at all. Then if you're in the second apron 3 out of 5 seasons, your first round pick automatically moves to the end of the first round. So there's a lot of talk about how, because these really punitive changes kick in this year. So there's a lot of talk about how teams like the Celtics, obviously the Clippers, who have been spending tons of money for years, like you might only get like a 2-year window now to try to capitalize on the best version of your team before you have to essentially sell the team off for parts and draft picks, and opt to have your draft pick not be at the end of the round, especially if you have a team that's sort of underachieving and getting paid tons of money. It's going to make things really difficult for those teams.
Shout out to my Suns.
Yeah, you go. Yeah, the Suns are going to be a big one for this. First rounders 7 years out can't be traded, which is a big deal for teams that love to leverage their draft picks. Maybe not quite so big of a deal for the Knicks, who own all their own draft picks plus some extras right now. Salaries cannot be aggregated or combined to trade for a single higher salary player. That is huge, potentially, for the Knicks if they hit this second apron, because then it essentially means they would need to find matching salaries if they want to get, say, a Devin Booker or something who makes like $50 million. You can only trade salaries 1 for 1 at that point. That makes things really tough. They can't use trade exceptions from the prior year, and they can no longer use cash in trades, which the Knicks bizarrely almost never do, despite having tons of money from James Dolan. So Gavin, I'll throw it to you to react before or maybe introduce the next talking point, because I've been talking for so long. There's a lot of dense info to get into, but my basic thought is that I think the Knicks need to find a way to just stay in the first apron this year, one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, and I think this is also going to they're gonna have to reevaluate how they use draft picks, because these last few years It clearly has not been a priority for the Knicks. And I think in particular that is stemming from Tom Thibodeau and his reticence to play younger players and invest in younger players. And look, you understand it because the Knicks are getting to a point of being really, really competitive. But if they want that to continue and they want that to be sustainable, they have to use their draft picks and they're going to have to hit on their draft picks. I want to get more into that. I also want to get into the implications around Jalen Brunson's extension, maybe a little talk about Julius Randle's extension, and just sort of what the Knicks plan is going forward. So we'll talk about all that next on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we're going to let you all know about our good friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Gavin, we're back in. Let's keep talking through the luxury tax. And yeah, I mean, I'm with what you were saying at the end of the segment. Like, I think this year the Knicks are going to have to get comfy with the idea of being a tax team. And it is smart that they've managed to avoid it. Like, they've taken great lengths, I think, to avoid paying it the last few years, like of dipping into that luxury tax at all. So they're not going to be a repeater team, but they might just kind of be one of those teams that has to jump all the way into the deep end right away. I guess part of my confusion with some of this has been, and this is like, it's all new territory because they made all these rules kick in. And I feel like even the people that cover the league don't necessarily know this stuff like in as of yet, and are kind of learning in real time based off the CBA. But it's like when these restrictions kick in, because it's like, I know for a fact luxury tax bills, like what you pay to the league, gets calculated at year's end. So, what'll happen is like that accounts for any trades or whatever during the season. And then like whatever your team's salary was on the very last day of the season, as you go into the off season, then they calculate your bill. And then, the Golden State Warriors pay $200 million to the league or whatever. And then you call it a day, or the Clippers or the Suns or whoever. And, all the tax teams pay their actual tax bill. The thing that I'm slightly more unsure about is if these restrictions kick in after you've paid your bill and take effect going into the next year, or if it all happens in real time. And if it happens in real time, it's going to get sticky for the Knicks in the offseason, because like there's a chance that they hit this first or second apron like within minutes of free agency starting. But if not, then I mean, maybe there's a case to just go all out. Like, if this stuff doesn't get calculated till the end of the season, go all out this offseason, get all the guys you need and all the things that you need to build your team, and then roll this season. And, with your big star trade completed, with everything, and then just be like, this is the core. We're going to roll with this for at least a couple of years, hopefully not hit that second apron, and potentially have our first round picks nuked for years to come. But I feel like there's definitely a case for this offseason kind of has to be the one way or the other, because otherwise the bills are going to add up pretty quick, even if Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson take modest raises on their current salaries.
Yeah, I think the reality of the new tax rules, and maybe this becomes a little different when the salary cap makes the jump in 2025. 2026. You had the quote in here from Bobby Marks that, quote, because of the new television contract that begins in 25-26, teams expect to see the cap increase annually by 10%. So maybe they're like you're betting on there being a gap essentially between that kicking in and the players like factoring that in to their negotiations. And of course, like the players like themselves are shrewd, the agents are shrewd, and to some extent that's going to be right away. But I think there might be like a small window there where you can strike this balance. But overall, I don't think we're going to see too many more teams going forward like the Kevin Durant Warriors, which already took like an all-time salary cap flip. That was like a 1-year jump, plus Steph being on probably like the single like greatest bargain of a contract all time, and Durant just happening to be a free agent that year, and the Warriors losing the finals. So that was fluky to begin with. Or the Heat, where you had like the LeBron, Bosh, Wade trio, like take whatever they needed to take to make it work, and then just a bunch of really talented vets like a Ray Allen, like a Mike Miller, like whoever else they had, like agree to take less money. But that combination of a team that is extraordinarily top heavy and able to supplement it with very good depth, I think that is pretty much gone from the NBA, with the lone exception being the current version of the Boston Celtics, who right now are striking that balance pretty well. That goes away, not this offseason, but next offseason when they have to give Jason Tatum his extension that I cannot imagine a world where he is not asking for max money and getting a contract around $300 million or probably even a bit over $300 million. But they have their 2-year window here to make it work with this team before they are in second apron hell. For the rest of the NBA, like you're picking one of two paths. Either you're picking the star-driven path, which I think teams like the Nuggets are doing, the Bucks are clearly doing, and it already, even before like the apron rules fully hit, like clearly limited how they could build their team this year, where they could just not find like a fifth player to pair with like Lopez, Dame, Chris Middleton, and Giannis. They were a 4-person team. The Sixers, who I think were better off than the Bucks, but also had that issue and are going to try to get Paul George this year, and I think essentially going to make the rest of their team minimum contracts if they pull that off. And then you look at a team like the Mavs, who I guess are maybe the closest thing to the Celtics end of the bucket, and that's probably why both those teams are going to be in the NBA Finals, where they have Luka and Kyrie, but they found options like on the relative cheap that are good and that fit with them. And then you have the Knicks and the Wolves, who are sort of on the other end of the barrel, where they have stars, but they're not making a ton of money yet, because I don't think Anthony Edwards' extension kicks in until next season. So he's currently like not making crazy money, and that's allowed them to pay Naz Reid, who's also way underpaid. It's allowed them to continue to pay Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, who are making big money. But at some point, like the Wolves are going to have to trade off that depth because they do have that star power. And I think the Knicks are, to finally get to the point, are kind of the truest blue version of what I'm talking about, like where they have the depth and they have quote unquote stars. But right now, Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson are not really getting paid all NBA type money. Like they're just not getting paid at all NBA type money. They're making $30 million a year or a little bit under. All NBA type money is going to be going forward like minimum $50 million a year, probably a lot more, with the exception of Jalen Brunson, because he seems willing to take a massive discount for the Knicks. Right now, the report out there is that it would be like a 5-year, $156 million contract. If I'm
4 for 156.
Yeah, so it's $39 million a year for Jalen Brunson, which he would be giving up $15 million a year. And I think that's because he is acutely aware of just how much it would limit the Knicks to wait the extra year. And the positive trade-off for him is he gets the security of signing that versus like risking some kind of traumatic injury. Not that the Knicks would ever screw over Brunson to that extent, but like there is a trade-off for some security for a smaller guard if he suffered a traumatic injury. All that is to say, I think Jalen Brunson is going to make things work. I think my big question going forward is Julius Randle going to be willing to make things work the same way? And to be clear, like me saying that like isn't a judgment. Like I think all these guys should get the maximum amount of money they can. I just don't know at the end of the day that's going to be on the Knicks for Randle. And I think the question the Knicks are going to have to ask, all right, if you are going to pay Julius Randle all NBA money, is there a better player you could be giving that money to?
Yeah, and I talked about that in my last episode about whether Julius Randle might take a discount like that, like he did the last time, and maybe his last contract is what we can look to for a little inspiration there. So we'll talk about that in just a second and close out this discussion talking about how we think the Knicks should go about team building going forward. All right, and we're back in. And Gavin, we closed off last segment talking about Julius Randle and how he might be the key. And I'm kind of the belief, and there hasn't been any reporting about this just yet, but I feel like it might just kind of come out of the blue like it did last time. But last time Julius Randle was in a contract situation, he had just made All NBA for the first time in his career. He was on top of the world. I mean, obviously the like playoff disappointment of 2021 was real. You know, like people were like, oh, you know, what did this say about Julius Randle and the Knicks and blah, blah, blah. But I think the general consensus certainly amongst us and amongst most people was like, they just need to get him more help. Like he you know, he was transcendent in that 20 to 21 season. The rest of the team needed to get better to make things easier on him. And of course, now they are better. But Julius said at that time, and, you know, people were like, oh, he could sign an extension, or like, you know, he could go for he could like wait 1 year and then get way more money. And it's sort of a similar discussion to what we're having with Brunson right now. And obviously, you know, things with hindsight, you know, maybe things worked out better for him to sign that extension then, because he had a really terrible year the next year, and maybe that would have hurt his free agency. But in that moment, everybody was kind of shocked that he signed the extension that he did when he did. It was 4 years, 117 million maximum. If he hit like some bonuses or whatever, which I'm fairly certain he did, because he made he made an All NBA team and multiple All-Star teams after that and everything else. So I'm fairly certain that he hit those bonuses. But, you know, it sort of took everybody off guard when he signed that deal. There's a part of me that would not be surprised if he and Brunson basically signed matching contracts, and maybe Randle takes what is his max extension this time around. But last time he left some money on the table too. Like he did not take what his maximum would have been the last time around when he extended instead of waiting for free agency. Brunson, his max extension is like almost 40 million less in total value than Randle's. So Randle's would average out to about 46, 47 million per season. If he signs what his maximum value is, it would be upwards of 200 million. But I don't know. Time will tell, but it seems like he's all in too. Like he had quotes straight up like a few years ago, you know, in 2021 being like, I just want to help the team win. I want to do what helps the team stay flexible and, you know, build a contender here. And I mean, that's super admirable, and probably something that's been a little underreported with regards to Randle, how willing to play ball he's been to keep this team in a position to continue building year over year. And, you know, again, I'm with you. I wish that the players didn't have to make these decisions just based off of punitive luxury tax implications and stuff, and could make every cent that they should, because quite frankly, it's a league where the owners are all obscenely wealthy. And, you know, I wish more of that wealth would be going to the players. But I said in the last episode, if both Randle and Brunson are willing to play ball and do that, and they feel financially stable with their families and everything else to make that decision, then from a fan perspective, how, you know, there's no way to say no to that. And I think that they probably are tracking towards doing that again.
Yeah, and I think two other things to consider there. I just think the optics of Julius making more than Jalen are not great. And I'm wondering if Jalen, and I think this is something that he knows, and something probably that's been emphasized to him, by taking only 39 million a year, quote unquote, only 39 million a year. I think that shapes the Anunoby negotiations. The Knicks are saying, like, look, like we'll pay you, but like we're not going to pay you more than Jalen Brunson. And then it's up to OG could say, all right, but the Sixers like want to give me the max. And maybe that's true. Maybe they want to give Paul George the max. Who knows? And that would get really dicey for the Knicks. But I do think if they know that Anunoby wants to be here, and I think just by the fact that they traded for him, and one of his agents is Leon Rose's son, Anunoby probably does want to be here, and that he was out there on a gimpy hamstring in Game 7. I think he will take a little less than what Jalen Brunson's making. I think Julius Randle, to your point, will probably ultimately take what Jalen Brunson is making, because the number of teams out there that can afford to pay Julius like more than that, and also want to pay Julius more than that, there just aren't a lot. Like Oklahoma City's maybe the one you would look at, but they're also like 2 years away from like having to think about paying all their guys. So they would have a very thin window to make that work. And they're just not a ton of teams out there throwing around money. Maybe Houston, if he wanted to go back to Texas, that would sort of be something to watch, but they have Jabari Smith as their power forward of the future. So you could find the team, and Julius could find the team if he really wanted to. I just cannot imagine a situation that he would like as much as New York. And maybe that's worth giving up $7-8 million a year for him to pull out. As far as wider implications of this, like, you said it, like this becomes the offseason for the Knicks to make their all-in move, and maybe ultimately makes this irrelevant with Julius because, like, given what this cap situation is, like, I would be surprised. Like, either you're trading away all your depth for a star, or I think more logically, you're probably trading away Julius Randle for a star, and that's what's like kind of screaming at me in neon lights from all this. So maybe the extension conversation wasn't worth it, but I think it is maybe worthy to discuss both paths the Knicks could go down, where they keep this current team that I think fully healthy, like we're seeing it right now from Dallas, like not that the Knicks are the exact same team, but is probably good enough to win a championship with the parity that's currently there in the NBA, and a recognition from Leon Rose in this front office that parity is going to be the reality going forward. But if James Dolan pushes, or if Leon Rose like thinks the better structure is around a bigger name, I don't know who that is yet. I can throw some ideas out there. But like this would be the summer to go for it. And I think Randle and maybe some of the tertiary pieces as well are going to be the things that have to move off. Because I don't know about you, Alex. Like, I don't really see a way like the Knicks make that type of deal. Like, let's just it's too early for Devin Booker. But if Devin Booker was the name, without Randle being the guy that is ultimately moved, and I'm wondering, like, maybe that if that guy just isn't there that summer, and if the Knicks don't consider Mikal Bridges that guy, which I maybe wouldn't, or they don't consider Paul George that guy, like, are they forced to wait even if this is the ideal summer to do it?
Yeah, I think it's going to limit who they can look at. I mean, I don't think I'm with you. I don't think Booker ultimately becomes available, but if we want to just use him as the example case, like I think the Knicks are going to have I think the number one thing that I'm getting through looking through all the salaries and seeing where the Knicks are going to be, presumably if they're paying like Randle, Brunson, and Anunoby all 35 plus million, and then have Josh Hart making 20 million and have Dante making 10. Obviously you've got like Deuce at the bottom there, who like is the perfect piece, who just is making like barely anything. Hopefully you draft a couple players this year. And then, you're going to have Hartenstein and Mitch making a combined 30 million, presumably, if you have both of them. I think all it screams to me is like, if you're going to make a move, it's probably going to have to be for like Donovan Mitchell, who makes a relatively affordable for now 35 million. Like, you're going to have to try to find a guy that this season is sort of a bargain, and who you can extend further beyond this year for more money, and then say, okay, next year is the year that we take the full on leap into the tax and everything else. But like next year, but by next year, I mean 2025 to 26, like this coming year, stay in that sort of like regular luxury tax zone. And then once all those extensions kick in, you're like, this is it. Like, we're going to see if we can win the whole thing. We're going to pay out the butt for this team for like 2 years beyond this coming season. And we have like a 3-year window essentially to try to win a championship. I think that's
you get that cap bump too. So if there was an antiquated contract before all this came into play, you end up getting that benefit.
Yeah, exactly. So, and honestly, like if Brunson and Randle signed to deals that pay them like $38 million or whatever per season annual value, then you're already looking at 2 deals that, as the years go on, will look antiquated, because 10% jumps is not insignificant. Like, the only reason it's only going up 10% each year is because that's another thing that the league put in place to avoid that Kevin Durant situation with the Warriors that you mentioned, where that year the cap went up by like 50% in one fell swoop, because the league signed their new TV deal at that time 10 years ago. Now they just got like, it was a lot of money. I think it was like $7 billion per season or something like that, from various TV providers. No more TNT. It's going to be, I think, NBC Sports, ESPN, and Amazon now, that are going to be handling NBA games. So, I mean, they're getting a huge influx of money for a long period of time. We're probably going to see the cap go up 10% for like, I don't know, 5 straight years, 6 straight years, maybe. If the league is honest about it, and how much money that they're making off this new TV deal. So that might help the Knicks in the long term too. But I do think, like, to get back to what I started rambling about a second ago, like, if you're going for like a $50 million player this year, I think it becomes pretty difficult to get there, and to sign all the free agents that you want to re-sign and all that stuff, unless you make that move prior to the new league year starting. I think that there is a chance that, like, if they think they're in on like Paul George, for example, that they would make that decision before free agency. Like, if the Clippers are willing to deal him, if George tells them, I'm out, I'm leaving, whether I go sign a free agent contract somewhere like the Sixers or not, I'm out of here, period. I would like to go to the Knicks. So let's make that work. Trade me there. You guys can get some assets back in return rather than losing me for absolutely nothing. Then maybe they play ball and say, okay, we'll trade him right before the new league year. That helps you guys get this done with regard to the Knicks. Then we get some stuff back so he doesn't just leave for nothing. Then the Knicks could just very quickly opt in Bojan Bogdanovich's last year. They could opt in Jericho Sims. They could opt in the option that they have on Daquan Jeffries. They could. I've seen like mixed stuff on if they snuck in team options on Shake Milton and if they snuck in team options on Diakite, the other two guys down the end of the bench. But maybe you just take that opportunity, say, okay, opt everybody into those deals, ship them all to, probably Mitchell Robinson too, unfortunately, ship them all to the Clippers, get George to opt into his final year of his deal, which is worth like just under $50 million, and then extend him once he gets to New York. Because then even if you're getting higher up in those luxury tax limits, the luxury tax doesn't impede your ability to just retain guys that are on your roster already, which then George would be going into the summer. So then the Knicks would be able to say, okay, now we're going to extend Paul George. We're going to extend Jalen Brunson. We're going to extend Julius Randle. We're going to re-sign OG Anunoby. We're going to re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein. And then maybe at that point, you probably say re-sign Precious Achiuwa too for that big man depth. And then you just roll with it and see how it goes. That's the only way I see the Knicks going for someone that makes that much money now at this point. Otherwise, I think once the new league year turns over and they start signing those new free agent deals and everything, it's going to become a lot more difficult unless they just time it where they say, hey, OG, Hartenstein, whatever, just wait a couple weeks to put pen to paper so that we can get these things done. But their cap holds will still exist too. So it's like, it just becomes so much more difficult, I think, once the new league year turns over for this to ultimately happen.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe a combo for another day because it's a long one, but I think there's a world where they look at Mikal Bridges, even though the cost in terms of like assets that you'd have to give out, since he's not a free agent and Brooklyn really values him, would be a lot higher. Like there's a world where that's the better option, given that at least for the next 2 seasons, he is only making $23 million a year. So that is an incredible, $23 million this year, $25 million the year after. And then he's an unrestricted free agent. And then maybe after that 25-26 season, if you're the Knicks, that's when you have to look at either trading Julius Randle or trading like quite a bit of your depth. Honestly, you'd already have to trade quite a bit of your depth to even to put in the $23 million and to match that and a lot of your picks. But the good news is you could spin that over in a future year and trade one of the other stars for assets. But you'd have a 2-year window of contention there where you're striking that Celtics-esque balance of having star power and having depth. And to me, again, conversation for down the road, that might be the better way to go than going all in on an aging Paul George. But again, that is a conversation for another day. He is Alex Wolfe. I am Gavin Schall. We'll be back with plenty more episodes this week and next. Some cool guests coming up. We're going to talk a little NBA draft and some more stuff. But until then, we'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.